The dinner rush had barely begun when Emily, a tired young waitress with gentle, patient eyes, looked up from a tray she was balancing and froze. The restaurant was already buzzing, silverware clinking, cooks shouting orders, customers chatting over their meals. But Emily heard none of it in that instant, because walking through the polished glass doors was a man whose face she had only ever seen on magazine covers and financial news screens. Charles Wyndham, a billionaire whose presence filled a room as easily as his well-filled headlines. Everyone knew his name, his companies, his fortune, but no one really knew his heart. People whispered that he was cold, calculating, and impossibly distant. Others said he didn't believe in kindness, only efficiency. Tonight, however, he wasn't here for steak or wine or some quiet dinner meeting. He was here for something Emily could never have imagined. He was here to test someone. Emily didn't know that. She was far too busy holding her breath and praying she wouldn't mess up another order. Her feet ached. Her shoes were worn thin, and her fingers trembled from exhaustion. Her mother's growing medical bills weighed on her chest like stones, suffocating her slowly. One mistake tonight could mean fewer hours next week, less money, less medication, less hope. But Charles noticed her. He watched her the moment she stepped forward to greet him, not with warmth, not with appreciation, but with quiet calculation. His eyes followed the way she held herself, the way she forced a smile despite being clearly tired, the way she apologized for being a few seconds late even though she wasn't. Emily didn't realize she was being studied. Before the story moves deeper, the narrator's voice seemed almost to echo through the room. Before we continue this powerful story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Heart Story, where every tale reminds us that kindness still matters. Emily approached Charles's table and served him politely, her voice soft and steady. She never complained. Not when he changed his order once. Not when he changed it a second time, claiming he had simply changed his mind. She kept smiling, even though every change meant running back and forth to the kitchen, dodging cooks and other servers, trying to ensure nothing else went wrong. Her feet throbbed, her fingertips shook, but her smile never wavered. Finally, the meal was finished, the plates cleared, and the bill was placed gently on Charles's table. He paused for a long moment, staring at the receipt as though deciding something. Then he scribbled something on it and stood. A $15 tip. For a billionaire. It wasn't generosity. It wasn't a mistake. It was a test. He wanted to see how a struggling girl would react when someone with limitless wealth treated her like she was invisible. He wanted to know whether kindness could truly exist without reward. As Charles walked toward the door, Emily's co-worker, a fiery girl named Sarah, leaned over his shoulder and saw the tip. Seriously? $15? For all your running around? That's an insult. Emily just sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. Then she whispered the words that made Charles freeze mid-step. It's okay. Maybe he needed the money more than I do. Her voice was calm, gentle, and astonishingly sincere. No sarcasm, no bitterness, no disappointment. Just a quiet acceptance, wrapped in compassion. That single sentence cut through Charles like lightning. What Emily didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Charles Wyndham had once been poor too. Before the wealth, before the fame, before the empire, he built brick by brutal brick. There had been a young boy who worked in a small diner very much like this one. A boy who scrubbed tables after school. A boy who took home leftovers because his mother was too sick to cook. A boy who had understood hunger, fear, and helplessness. His mother had taught him one lesson he had buried deep inside for decades. Son, give kindness even when you receive none. That's how you stay human in a world that forgets. Emily had unknowingly repeated his mother's exact teaching. Her simple, compassionate sentence cracked open a door inside his heart he had locked a long time ago. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Charles turned back and walked toward her. Emily looked up, startled, as he approached. She wasn't afraid. She was just surprised that someone like him would come back for someone like her. "Why did you say that?" he asked softly. Emily blinked, then smiled a small, tired smile. "Because you never know what someone is going through. People look at me and assume I'm struggling. And yes, maybe I am, but maybe he is too." Her eyes held warmth, not resentment. And something inside Charles broke open, something rigid, lonely, and untouched for years. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "do you still take care of your mother?" She nodded, confused that he remembered such a small detail from earlier. Charles sat down. He didn't plan to. He didn't even think. He simply sat, because for the first time in years, he felt human enough to. His hands shook as he reached into his jacket and pulled out his checkbook. Emily stood frozen, unsure what was happening. When he finished writing, he tore the check slowly and placed it in her shaking hands. Her breath caught. Her knees nearly gave out. $25,000. For your mother's treatment, Charles said quietly, from someone who once needed kindness too. Tears streamed down Emily's face, not because of the money, but because someone finally saw her, not as a waitress, not as a burden, not as a nameless worker in a crowded restaurant. Someone saw her humanity. Someone cared. Emily stood there, staring at the check as if it were something unreal, something too fragile to touch. Her fingers trembled around the edges, her breath shaking as a fresh wave of emotion surged through her. She tried to speak, tried to say thank you, but the words tangled in her throat. Charles simply nodded, his expression softer than anyone in the restaurant had ever seen. But the night wasn't over, not for him. After leaving the restaurant, Charles drove home in silence. His mansion was enormous, filled with every luxury imaginable, yet it felt unbearably empty that night. He walked through the silent halls, past the expensive paintings and polished floors, until he reached his private study, a room lined with books, dimly lit by a single lamp. He sat at his desk, staring at the blank surface for a long moment. Then, slowly, he picked up his pen. Something inside him had shifted, cracked open by a tired waitress with gentle eyes and an unwavering heart. Emily's kindness had made him remember the boy he used to be, the boy who used to believe in people, in goodness, in giving more than he received. Charles opened the drawer where he kept his legal documents and pulled out a thick folder, his will. His estate plan had been the same for years, straightforward and impersonal. Donations to charities, trust funds for distant relatives, endowments for institutions that barely knew him. But now, tonight, those pages felt cold and hollow. He started rewriting sections, line by line, with a clarity he hadn't felt in decades. A portion of my estate shall be dedicated to supporting hard-working, compassionate individuals like Emily, people who give kindness even when the world gives nothing in return. He paused after writing it, letting the words settle. It felt right. It felt meaningful. For the first time in years, he felt like his wealth had a purpose beyond numbers, beyond reputation. Kindness wasn't something his money could buy, but kindness was something his money could protect, could uplift, could multiply. And Emily had reminded him of that truth. When morning finally came, Emily was just finishing her shift at the restaurant. She looked warm but hopeful, tired but lighter than she had been in months. She kept touching the check tucked carefully into her apron pocket, still half convinced she might wake up and find it gone. Then the manager walked over, holding a small envelope. "This was delivered for you," he said. Emily's heart fluttered as she opened it. Inside was a simple handwritten note. Not printed, not typed, but written with the shaky sincerity of someone who had rediscovered something precious. "Your kindness changed a billionaire." But more importantly, it reminded a broken man what being human means. Charles Wyndham. Emily pressed a note to her chest, tears gathering in her eyes again, soft, quiet tears of gratitude and relief. She had spent so many nights believing the world couldn't see her, that goodness didn't matter, that her efforts were invisible. But now she understood something powerful. Even the smallest moment of compassion can reach places you never expect. Even a $15 moment can become $1 million miracle. And miles away, standing by his window as the sun rose, Charles Wyndham exhaled deeply. For the first time in years, he felt lighter, human, alive, because one young waitress, exhausted and struggling, chose kindness when she had every excuse not to. And sometimes that is enough to change a life.